Hello everyone, this is Miss Gatch, and I am here today to talk to you guys about the progressive error. So I'm going to try my best to make this really short and sweet for you and to the point. Just wanted to give you guys a little recap here about the progressive error and what it was all about. So give me one second, let me just get my pointer tool out really quick. Okay, so this is a time progressive era where there was a lot of reforms taking place. So remember, reform meaning that they wanted things to change. So as we talked about in other units, there was a lot of, particularly in the cities, a lot of people that were living in poverty. They were having trouble just really making ends meet. So you had a group of people that set out to try to reform society or change society. So progressive era, this is a period of social activism and political reform in the United States that took place from 1890s to 1920. Um, and again, remember these reformers, these progressive reformers, they were trying to improve urban conditions. They were trying to improve life in the city. They were trying to clean up corruption in business and in government as well. But the biggest thing about them is that they weren't trying necessarily to bring things back to how they used to be, but rather instead they were trying to make changes by imposing new rules, by imposing different order on government and society. So they had four main goals, which you can see listed here. The first one was the purification of government. So again, they were trying to end corruption that was going on within government by exposing and weakening those political machines and bosses that had controlled the government. And we're going to see how they do that in just one second. And then another one was prohibition, which we've talked about many times, which would be the banning of alcoholic beverages. And then a third goal was women's suffrage, meaning the right to vote. So one of their goals was to gain the right to vote for women. So they promoted bringing a pure female vote into the arena. They thought that would be very beneficial to society. And then last was building an efficiency movement. So just a way to make things more efficient. They wanted to modernize the old ways of doing things. They wanted to come up with different scientific, medical, and engineering solutions just to make society more efficient, to make life better. So again, remember that first goal we talked about was about just exposing things within government and society. So the way that they did this was through people known as muckrakers. And what they were these investigative journalists who exposed waste, corruption, and scandal in the press. So a lot of their work was extremely exaggerated, of course, just trying to get the public attention. But it did lead to a lot of government investigations and much needed reform, so they were successful. Some of the main muckrakers were Ida Tarbell, Upton Sinclair, and Jacob Riis, and we're going to look at them in just one second. So why were they doing this? Why were they trying to expose waste, corruption, and scandal? Really because they wanted change. So they were trying to encourage that change and put pressure on the government to regulate businesses to prevent further abuses. So by doing these exaggerated stories, they would get the public involved, and the public would start to agree with them and see all these horrible things that are going on, and put more pressure on the government to actually change things. So Upton Sinclair, he is one of our first muckrakers that we're going to talk about. He is known for writing this book called The Jungle, where basically what it did was it exposed the unsanitary conditions of the meatpacking industry. So he was sent to go investigate the meatpacking industry, and he finds just these horrible, horrible conditions. He says that there were workers that were just mutilated by different corrosive chemicals. They were injured while lifting these heavy animal carcasses. They lost fingers to sharp knives. There was rats running all over the place, meat rotting, and just a bunch of other super unhealthy, unsanitary conditions that he found, and he reported on them. And he said, this was one of his quotes, he says that he aimed at the public's heart and by accident I hit it in the stomach. Because if you ever read any excerpts from this, from The Jungle, and this link goes into a lot about it, if you ever read any of those or watch this YouTube video. It's pretty gross. So if you have a sick or weak stomach, I do not recommend watching this. So yes, basically he exposes the meatpacking industry, and it ends up getting a lot of results from it. The Roosevelt Commission ends up investigating Sinclair's account. They look into it and they end up backing him up. So Roosevelt ends up pushing for the Meat Inspection Act, which was a law that was passed in 1906 that set strict cleanliness requirements for meat packers and created federal meat inspection programs. And then also the Pure Food and Drug Act was passed in 1906 to halt the sale of contaminated foods and drugs, and it also required truth in labeling. So you couldn't put a label on something that said it was XYZ and it really wasn't. So Pure Food and Drug Act was basically about truth in labeling, and the Meat Inspection Act, again coming from Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, required more strict cleanliness requirements for meat packers. So a lot of results did come from Upton Sinclair and his work, The Jungle. Ida Tarbell, she was another one, another muckraker, and she worked to expose the Standard Oil Company, which hopefully we are all very familiar with this. We've heard this term, this company many, many times with John D. Rockefeller. So she did a whole lot of research and found that John D. Rockefeller used a lot of corrupt business methods, and so she wanted to expose them. So she put out the history of the Standard Oil Company, and she reveals the illegal means that John D. Rockefeller used to monopolize the oil industry. And this is just a cartoon showing the octopus, or the Standard Oil Company up here, that's seizing all the nation's oil businesses. So Ida Tarbell, we can associate her with exposing John D. Rockefeller and his corrupt business practices. And so the last one we're going to talk about today is Jacob Riis, and he was a photographic journalist. So he did a lot of his work, obviously, through photographs. He published this photographic book that was called How the Other Half Lives. And basically what it did was it documented the poverty and hopelessness that was in the cities. And this is just a picture, one of his pictures that he had. So you can see, a bunch of people all living in this little house. And that's just what he did. He wanted to expose what city life was really like through his photographic journalism. All right, so last but not least, we have some major reforms that were made during the Progressive Era. And because remember, that was one of their other main goals, was that they wanted to bring democracy closer to the people. They wanted to make government both more honest and more efficient. So they did that through a number of reforms, one being the secret ballot, meaning no one can know how you vote. And I know it's weird to think that that wasn't ever a thing, that people could actually know how you voted before. And then initiative was another one. And this allowed citizens to propose legislation and vote directly on whether to pass it into a law. And referendum, very similar, gave voters the right to decide if a proposed state law should be passed or not. Kind of like when I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but when you go to vote, there'll be a list of different things on the ballot that you can also vote for. So that's what that was. And then recall was where voters would have the right to remove elected representatives from office, even if it was in the middle of their term. If they felt like this person was not being honest and doing what they said that they were going to set out to do, then they could remove them from office. And then last is the direct primary. So candidates for office are chosen by the voters instead of politicians. So before, politicians would be the ones that could choose the next candidate for office, but through direct primary, the candidates that would run for a position were chosen by the voters instead. So to even be put on that ballot, the voters had to choose through direct primary. So that is all that I have for you guys today. I hope that you got a little bit of information out this, and you will be more prepared when you come to class and we discuss this. So thank you so much for watching. I hope y'all have a wonderful day.